I think that's definitely high chance.
Oh yeah.
If it interests you.
Yeah. That sounds great. Okay. Oh yeah, I did see that in chat. Ooh, awesome. Okay. Anybody else have thoughts? I think we're about to be live on YouTube, but you can. Yeah, we are. We're live. Hey everybody.
Okay. And if you haven't already subscribed, please
Wave.
do.
Oh yeah. Wave to the people on YouTube. Hi, people on YouTube. I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 131 subscribers on YouTube now, which is kind of cool. We also passed 1,500 members on our meetup group, which is pretty cool too. I am going to pull up some slides for y'all, if I can figure out how to do that. And maybe I can, and maybe I can't. Does that work? Can you see a slide?
We can.
Good. I'm not going to go into presenter mode because I'm afraid that will ruin it all. All right, everybody. Welcome to slc.net. We're happy to be here tonight. We're happy to come at you live from your living room and mine, or wherever in your house you may be, or hotel. I don't know where you are. You can be wherever you like. It doesn't matter. That's the point. So welcome here tonight. And if you want more information about slc.net, if this happens to somehow be your first time here, you can find that on our website at slcnet.tech. All right. So a little bit about us. We're just a small organization based in Salt Lake City, Utah. We are putting together a monthly event where we bring in really great speakers to talk about topics related to .NET, because we love .NET and we know a lot of other people do too. And so that's why we're here. So we'll go through that a little bit, and then pretty soon we'll hear from our speaker, our guest speaker for tonight, Thomas Camargo. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit more. So I'm going to go through housekeeping really quick. So a couple of things that we always do for our presenters. One is we try and gather a speaker rating for them. At the end of the evening, we'll send out a survey link in chat, but it'll also be in the slide, I think, but we'll try and send the link in chat so you can just get to it nice and easy, to give a rating to Thomas for his presentation. And if you're so inclined, a comment, because what good is a 3 out of 5 if you don't know why it's a 3 out of 5, right? Or what good is a 5 out of 5 if you don't know why? So a little context can be helpful for our speakers, but if you don't have time for that, you just want to throw down a number, go for it. That works too. Let's see. Caleb mentioned just a second ago, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Here's a handy dandy link to get to it. We actually unlocked the ability to have a custom name for our YouTube channel, but it didn't make it through the debates. So at some point we will decide on a name for our YouTube channel. And then we'll have that instead of this link. The last item here is make sure and ask questions using the chat feature in Zoom or in YouTube. We'd rather not have you necessarily speak up in the middle of the presentation, but if you use the chat, then we'll make sure that your question gets seen and hopefully answered. And then lastly, we want to thank our sponsors who help put this thing on through either volunteer work or through donations, or often we've hosted events at Health Equity and DealerTrack. Tech Systems buys lunch for the board sometimes. Yeah, lots of good stuff. Anyway, and without any further ado, I would like to, I'm going to hand it over to Thomas Camargo. So just a little bit about Thomas. I'm not going to read from the script here because I've worked with Thomas, and he's a pretty stand-up guy. He's a great engineer, and we're really excited to have him, really lucky to have him. He also grows the beardliest of beards. So yeah, I mean, I'm jealous. What can I say? I don't know. Do I need to say anything else about you? He works at Pluralsight, and he's a super sharp guy. So I think without any further ado, I can hand it over to you. And I'm gonna, yeah.
Okay, all right, let me share my screen here. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. I've been putting this together, and I'm glad to finally, share this and get this over with. So, all right. So at work, I recently migrated our microservice that we've been working on from .NET to ASP.NET Core, and we learned a lot in like the process. There were some mistakes we made along the way, and there's also some material that I feel like was kind of lacking. So I thought, getting a presentation together would be useful for, to help kind of share what we've learned. So kind of like my goals for you is that you can learn from like some of the mistakes that we made, that you can put a plan together for how to migrate your applications. And then, finally that, with that, you can finally migrate over. So my focus is going to be on ASP.NET Core, is where it's going to be. I haven't done WPF and WinForms for a really long time, but hopefully from what you've learned here, you will be able to apply that to those if you work in those applications. So, why migrate to .NET Core? Well, you've probably heard, about .NET 5 and stuff, and how .NET Framework 4.8 is like the last major update to .NET Framework. So it's still going to be supported from what I can find online. Oh, but by the way, I will provide these slides on the Slack group. So you guys can find the stuff you want to click through these links and stuff. So it looks like it'll still be support for quite some time, but it's going to be, none of the innovation is going to be happening in .NET Framework anymore. All of that's going to be in .NET Core, and essentially what's going to become the future of .NET 5. So, all right. So before you migrate to ASP.NET Core, there's like some preparatory work you want to do on your projects. There's asyncing and dependencies are like kind of the two big things you want to get out of the way before you start looking into saying, hey, I want to start my migration. One of the things about this is you can still deliver, like your product work and also this preparatory work as you go, right? And so that's really beneficial to have happen. So kind of oops. There you go. Yeah. So about async, right? The threading model is different in .NET Core. I don't know everything about it. I just know it handles threads differently than the .NET Framework runtime did. And especially like the asyncing to sync type calls, if you're mixing and matching stuff, it really, really doesn't like that. Like .NET Framework doesn't like that either, but .NET Core really doesn't like it. And especially, all right, you can have exceptions happen, deadlocks, poor performance. So you just want to really make sure you kind of take care of this before you migrate to .NET Core. All right. There's so much about asyncing. I figure, I'll put up a few bulletin points and move on. One of those things is, right, you want to async full stack, right? Don't mix and match. Don't use your .wait or .result, right? Avoid using your async void unless like you're in an event handler, where that's like the only recommended place to use it, because it doesn't return a task up to the caller, so they can't like await it. And also use configure wait false. Like configure wait false allows it to release the context, so it allows for it to run to take up to free up resources and allows for better performance. So there's that about asyncing. And I won't click on these, but these are some good resources I think that's available to learn. There's there's always good Pluralsight courses as well that you can take that does a much bigger deep dive. And there's also, if you guys have a certain subscription with Pluralsight, you can do some interactive courses, which allows you to code in like the browser and run them on projects. So like to learn how to do async, I think that's a really good resource to use if you guys have that type of subscription. So the biggest hurdle that you'll be conquering in this preparatory work is dependencies. And if you haven't kept track of dependencies, it's sometimes they kind of get forgotten about and you realize, oh, hey, I've got all these updates that need to happen. Some you're using may not even be supported anymore, right? It's like it hasn't been supported in the last couple of years. Well, with that means it may not work in .NET Core. And so you have to look into upgrading your dependencies. A lot of them, it's pretty simple. A lot of it's just upgrading to like a newer version or a later version. And some may have to be replaced. Like one of the preparatory work we did before is in our testing projects, we used something called should, this library that allowed you to kind of type out your assertions as like an English sentence. Well, should wasn't supported anymore, and it was only .NET Framework. And so then we looked into migrating to shouldly, which is one that had .NET standard support. And that there was a little bit of code changes, but for the most part, it was pretty easy to change over. And so that was like one type of migration we had to like replace out, like one type of dependency we had to replace out. So like you want to narrow down what these dependencies are. And so, and also your first party dependencies. So for example, if you share any like NuGet packages that your company owns and maintains, right, you want to make sure you upgrade those to .NET Standard so that you can support .NET Framework and .NET Core. If .NET Standard's not really an option, you can also maybe look into creating like a .NET Framework version and also a .NET Core version. A tool that I found useful to find out, hey, do I have like what dependencies I need to update and what problems I have in my migration process. So Microsoft has a tool out called .NET Portability Analyzer. You install this into Visual Studio and you can analyze your project. It's not perfect. It gives you like a good estimate about what needs to update. It will also give you some like false positives type things. So if you have like ASP.NET application, it will like give you lots of like, hey, there's lots of problems here with your web applications. Like, yeah, that's of course because ASP.NET Core is different. And so when you just create a new ASP.NET Core project, most of those problems go away. So, I will show you that tool. So I have it installed on my Visual Studio, and you have multiple options. You can analyze it just on a project. You can analyze it on your whole solution. And all you have to do is just click analyze your assembly portability. It's pretty quick, but my solution is very small. And it pops up a report that you can open up and tells you, hey, going to .NET Core, I'm 100% pretty much compatible in these two projects. Although it's just barely recently written, so right, and I've installed all the latest, so yeah, that's a given essentially. So what's .NET Standard? I figure it's probably good to share so you guys get a good understanding. All right, it's a way to share code between all these different types of platforms in the .NET world. It's platform agnostic, so essentially you can think of it kind of like a contract saying that these runtimes need to implement this, the underlying like actual implementation of it. And so your test projects can't actually target .NET Standard. They won't have something to run against. So like your test projects will still need to be, using .NET Framework or .NET Core. And there's multiple versions with different compatibility requirements. And so you should look into what .NET versions you're running and to see what compatibility you have. Hopefully you should be okay with just going to .NET Standard 2. there's a little caveat here. It says 461, but in reality, 461 is not the .NET framework you want to be. It actually says they recommend you being at 472 or higher. That 461 is just kind of what NuGet says. There was a lot more APIs added, and I think it was either in 4.7 or 4.7.1 where they added a lot more dependencies in there. So like that's the version you want to look at being when you're using version 2. Oh, let's see. Also, when you're changing things to .NET Standard, do not go to start 2.1 yet. 2.1 is not supported in .NET Framework, and you won't be able to use it in your migration process. So just so you guys know. So there at work, we had 2 methodologies on the way how we converted projects. We had like a manual way where we would like remove the project out of the solution, rename the folder, create the project again with like the correct framework, and then copy over the files and install our needed dependencies. The reason why we did this was it kept our dependency list according to what we truly needed. Because if you ever inherit an application, sometimes it's hard to know if everything is still truly needed and stuff. So that helps you kind of narrow down, kind of prunes your dependency list. And sometimes they go away too. Like it's actually, you don't need this because .NET, ASP.NET or something like that, core brings it in or something, or the dependency is different, right? A little more steps, but it also does a little bit of extra things for you too. I have this as .NET Standard, but when you're creating it for ASP.NET Core, it includes your startup code as well, because that startup code is completely different. And so you have to write that yourself. And so it's nice just to get that created and then you can add to it instead of writing it all. There's also another tool you could try using. We had some success with it. It worked better on class libraries for us. It's called try-convert. It's a .NET tool that will convert your application for you. But there's some caveats, right? It keeps all your dependencies around. It's not perfect. It may not work. You may have to then come in and manually fix things, but it's a nice tool that if you have a simple application, a simple class library, this can work for you. And so there's a GitHub here for it. It's part of the .NET group. So it has a good reputation for it. And it's pretty easy to use. All you have to do is just do a .NET install, a .NET tool install -d try convert, and it takes care of it for you. And I have installed it already. So we can go through and let's try converting this class library that I have. So this class library I have created is something very simple. I wanted to give you guys the example. I call it this awesome logger. It wraps log4net and essentially just logs a message, right? Very simple. I wanted to have something to show you guys. So what the tool that we can use, so I'm just going to close out of Visual Studio so this doesn't try to interfere with anything in my conversion process. I'm just going to close out of that. And I've got something up already that on my solution area, I'm going to convert it at the solution level, and I'm just going to call try convert. And it's a pretty quick process, especially on something so small. And I'll open up VS Code so we can look at some of this stuff a little easy. It'll create an old version of your previous one in case you kind of need to switch back. But when we look at our CS project file, it created it in the new concept, which is what they call this like SDK, Microsoft.NET SDK, but you can still see we're targeting 4.7.2. And if we go, so like that's the test project. If we head over to that other project that does the actual logging, that's on 4.7.2 as well. So a lot of times when you use this tool, you need to come in here and manually, copy over like the target framework you want and move it in here. So I'll make this .NET Standard 2, and then the class library, the test project, I can now convert that to a .NET Core application. So let's do that as well, instead of leaving it as .NET Framework. So we'll come in here and paste that in. And yeah, restore. And there are some things you'll notice that there may have been some problems in my conversion here. So if I do a .NET build, it might complain about, let's see. So it says that it couldn't resolve the system configuration assembly. So let's open this back up in Visual Studio. So essentially when you do this conversion, right, it kind of keeps your dependencies around, and sometimes that could be a problem. Like it shows that, hey, I've got this dependency, can't really do anything with it. So as far as I can tell, this dependency is not needed. So let's remove it out of the application. And now we should be in a good, clean building state. And I can come in here and run this amazing test that I have over here as well. Nope. There we go. It's running, and the test projects are good to convert because I'll show you have stuff working, right? And I got a green showing that, hey, yeah, it was able to run my .NET standard code in a .NET Core application. So pretty simple process there, but of course this was a very simple project. One of the other things I need to do real fast is I need to create a NuGet package out of this, because I use it in another application to show you guys some examples of this. So let me go over here, and I need to actually update this version number for my NuGet package. And let's do a quick rebuild here. And then let's package it up. And then if we head over to my file system here, we will see my NuGet package here, and I'm just going to copy it over and drop it in here to be used later on. Okay. So we got a project converted. So that's kind of one of the things you're going to do first in this preparatory work is go through, update these NuGet packages, get your first party NuGet packages up to date so that they can be shared and you're ready to move on. The reason why you want to do this, right, is you want to keep focus on your main goal, and that main goal is going to ASP.NET Core. And so jumping in between code bases can be kind of distracting and cumbersome. So you want to try to limit that as much as possible. So in test projects, I did this already, but for .NET Core, your test projects need this Microsoft this .NET test SDK. It allows it to be like discovered and also to be ran. I noticed in .NET Framework, I didn't need that when I was using NUnit, but in .NET Core, you definitely need that. NuGet packages should be installed, just so you know. So, all right. So also, I've kind of mentioned this before, but right, some dependencies will be completely replaced when you go to ASP.NET Core. So understand which ones they will be replaced. So when you start your migration, you have a list of, hey, these things are going to be replaced. So you don't have to worry about trying to take care of it now. You do that when you actually start the conversion process. And kind of one of those things that change is like the way how you pull out app settings, the way how you do dependency injection, and that stuff's all different in ASP.NET Core. So that's not something you want to try to fix now. So if you need that .NET Framework support, that .NET Standard support, go to 4.7.2 or higher, right, to get that support there. If you don't need it, or if you're already there, right, you don't have to worry about updating, or just don't bother if you don't need that, if you don't have any dependencies that you need that need that support, you can just kind of skip this step and go. But it's a good kind of preparatory work to make sure you're work with the latest .NET standard. So another thing you want to do is you want to build up a bit of a foundation with ASP.NET Core. There's some differences that are a bit different with it. Some of those things is like startup code, the settings, dependency injection. So you want to build up a little bit of foundation before you start, because you want to kind of know a bit what you're doing so that you can, streamline that process and kind of shorten your window of when you're starting your migration and finishing it. Pluralsight has some good courses on it. Microsoft has some good things about how configuration works, how the middleware works, and also they have some stuff on dependency injection. So build up that knowledge before you start the migration. So, all right. So you got to the point where you've asynced your code base, you've updated dependencies, you replaced them, you've learned about ASP.NET Core, you are essentially ready to start. So let me give you some advice that my team, a mistake that we felt like we made. And that was, we tried to support ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET in our same code base. So we had we had two ASP.NET projects. One was like our web API. Another one was our front end was a React application that were two separate projects. And then we had like a Rabbit listener to receive messages, like eventing, and we also had something that listened to SQSQ. So we had like four different deployables, and we wanted to support both applications, like both types at the same time, and kind of deliver piecemeal. So one of the things we started with was like, okay, we know we need to update our dependency injection framework. We were using structure map, and so like, hey, we're using structure map. Going to Lamar is not that different, because Lamar's like is made from the same creator from structure map, but we had some performance problems doing that. We got it working, but like our application, from what we could tell, had a memory leak. It just kept building up memory, and we had a limit on our IES application that would say, hey, once you get to this amount of memory, it would like essentially restart. And so eventually it would build that up over a period of time, hit that, restart our application, and then that cycle would start over. And so we spent a few days trying to do this, and we realized that it was essentially distracting us from our end goal, which was getting to ASP.NET Core. And so we decided, you know what, let's not focus on trying to support both in the same code base at the same time. Let's just do the migration. And when we did that, we started making a lot of progress in our actual end goal. So and my advice is, don't try to support both. It creates overhead. It creates like complexity in trying to make your app settings, dependency injection, maybe anything else working in there. And if you don't have a choice, right? Say if you have a massive monolith, that doing just a complete, replace that's not possible, then look into ways on how you can do that. You're probably gonna have to create like a wrapper over your settings that you can register different types of settings provider, one that works with configuration manager, one that works with iConfiguration, or maybe have different types of dependency injections that you might have to bring up towards like your deployable projects or something. So unless you have no other options, try not to do this. It just makes things longer, I think, and harder to handle. So
would you recommend people kind of doing as a the update to the new .NET Core configuration settings, right? Since that could be done in parallel prior to switching the app over entirely?
Yeah, that's something that's something you could probably do. We didn't look into how to use it in .NET Framework, so I don't have any experience with it. We just we didn't explore that field at all.
We've got one other question from chat as well, which was, what advantages did you find to using Lamar for DI over using the built-in DI and ASP.NET Core? What problems did Lamar solve for you?
So we actually did not end up using Lamar in our actual migration. We ended up just using the built-in because it provided everything that we needed. The reason why we chose Lamar the first time around was we were using structure map already, and that was like the next evolution of structure map in ASP.NET Core. And so that's the reason why we tried doing that. So that's mainly what we tried to do. But unless you need, like, the built-in one's very simple and it works really well. So unless you need like additional features that the built-in one doesn't provide, like you don't need to use Lamar, or there's some other ones like AutoFact or some like I have a list I can show some other third-party ones. So. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will continue on. I guess, did I answer your question though before I continue on though? From Gary, right? Okay, all right, cool. All right, so I also wanted to kind of build up a little bit of your knowledge here about how some of this stuff works. So that you have a bit of like, hey, how does configuration work? How does dependency injection, so that you have that understanding. So the configuration is all centralized in this iConfiguration interface, and it's really easy to use, simple. You can have it injected into all sorts of places from the dependency injection. And what's awesome about it is you can load configuration from multiple different sources. You can have multiple JSON files. You can load in configuration from environment variables, from command line arguments, and you can also build in like custom like providers as well to load in configuration. It's super powerful and easy to use. It took my team, like, we read a little bit about it and just exploring a little bit, and my team picked it up really quick on how to use it, and even how to write extension methods on top of it was really easy too. So, but one thing to know about the iConfiguration is order matters in it. Each configuration source that gets loaded in, think of it as an upsert. If it's not there, it's going to add it in. If it is there, it's going to update it. So if app settings is first, anything that app settings .environment, so say if that was like production or development, would take effect over my app settings, and then my secret managers would replace anything over here. Environment variables would replace anything, up the chain. So that's something important to remember, that your order matters quite a bit here in your configuration. And let's go look at that here. So I created an example application here so that we can look at some dependencies. I mean, the configuration. So what's also really cool about it is you can build up your own configuration data too. So say, for example, I just like for my test project, I've got some integration test project and I need to build up the configuration data. Well, I can do that by doing a configuration builder, setting the base path of where like I'm running, and loading in all my configuration files and environment variables if I want, so that I can use those in my tests and pass that down into my tests. So that's something that's really awesome about ASP.NET Core, is you have easy access to build up configuration outside of the ASP.NET Core, like I guess like pipeline. Another thing is your application. When you run a default application ASP.NET Core, let's run this so you guys can see this. I think I'm on the correct thing. The default ASP.NET Core will build up kind of what I showed you guys before. So if we look at this configuration host, we can see all the sources that are in here. Oh, I guess I should do it here. This is probably easier to see. And so we can see we have configuration source that's like this chain configuration. I'm not quite sure which one, what that really does, but we can see we have a app settings. We have app settings.development, you know, a secrets.json. So we can see we have a default configuration built just right out of the box. But I can also add to it if I want. So I can rebuild that configuration by loading in, essentially doing all those same calls again if I want, or I can add to, hey, I want a secrets manager. I want to add the user secrets when I'm in development, because when you're in development, you're like, hey, I've got secrets. I want to load in from a file, but I want the outside of my code base, so I don't actually check into my Git repository. So like that's a way to add in some of these secret passwords and stuff, just right off the bat. And I've got configuration loaded up. Oh, sorry, this was something I was exploring for a future part in the applet in the presentation. So really easy to work with configuration there. So next is dependency injection. You know, you guys heard this already, right? It's got built-in dependency injection. I'm going to cover it anyways, right? So with the built-in dependency injection, like I mentioned, it's very simple, and you have to manually register everything into your container, and then it'll take care of the rest for you, right? It'll inject it into your controllers. It'll create all your objects for you. But the thing you have to remember about the built-in dependency injection is it only can create what's registered. So even if it had the ability to create something, because it has all of its dependencies, it won't create it unless you register it in the IOC for it. And that's something called, it's usually called the iService collection, is the way how you register your dependencies. And I mentioned that it's a bit limited, and you have to go through and add, like, you know, a registration saying it's a singleton, or it's a transient, or it's scoped for its lifetime. But luckily, someone was like, hey, you know, manually doing it is a bit of work on large projects. So we have something. It's a third-party tool. I always forget how to pronounce this, so hopefully I don't like mess it up. I think it's pronounced Screwtor or Screwtor. Yeah, Screwtor. Hopefully that's how you pronounce it. But it essentially adds in your automatic registrations for you, so you can do your assembly scanning and register your classes as interfaces, and also like its classes, so that you can have that nice functionality of using the built-in dependency injection and having assembly scanning for it. So let's just go look at that real fast here, so everyone can see that. Let's see, did I should have added this here. So okay, yeah, so for this example thing, I extracted out, like I just created a default web API one, and extracted some stuff out of it, so you can see the dependency injection happen. So it's that random forecast generator. I just took out that code, moved it to another class, and I registered it in this configure services method of the build. And I said, hey, I want a transient one of, oh, that should not have been there. So like that's like the manual way of doing it. With that third-party deal, NuGet package installed, oops, I can replace this registration with my assembly scanning, where I say, hey, from this call and assembly, I want to add classes as a matching interface with the lifetime of transient. There's also a lot more you can do with this. You can also say, I want them as self, and what as self does is will also register the concrete type as well in your interface. So if for some reason you need to create your, like work with the concrete type, that's how you would do it. Because like I said, it won't build something if it's not registered into the IOC. So like that's how you can build concrete types instead of getting like the interface that is of that concrete type, right?
Thomas, can you increase the font?
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
So with the, you also have, so say for example, you have somewhere in your application you don't want like scanned. This also has ability to do that. So say for example, there's like a folder. It's like, hey, I don't want this scanned in here because it's not, doesn't need to be part of my IOC, because your IOC will throw an error if it can't validate its container that everything can be built properly. So if you have an area that's like, hey, I need to exclude, you can include that as, here, I'm just going to say options here, as a lambda in here. And then you can say, hey, I actually only want to register stuff that's assignable to my random forecast generator or something. All right, so they'll only do automatic registration that can be assigned to this. You can even narrow it down to like namespaces. So like if you have like a folder that you want to exclude, or, and I think you have options to say not as well. So if you say in this namespace, I'm just going to provide an empty string here. No. It does not like that. I should have, this is the problem with live coding. I should have looked a little bit more before I did this. So you can, I guess that one works off of types. Oh, so like that not in namespace, that's the one I was looking for. So you can use that not in namespace. So you can say, hey, don't register anything in here. And so it filters out that stuff, which is something that my team had to do, is in filtering out some portions of our code because we didn't want it included into our IOC. Also with the IOC, if you have to do some manual registrations and you need to kind of create the object yourself and include it in, you have the capability by creating, I guess, what do they call them? Are they generator functions or creator functions? But it's a lambda that takes in this iService provider. So the iService provider is your, essentially your IOC that you can pull stuff out of. So you can then say provider get required service or get service to pull out, like, you know, to have the IOC create the objects, and then you can pass that into like the object that you want to create. So if you have like multiple constructors, that's how you would, you know, kind of target which constructor you want to use to create the object. Okay. Let's jump back over here. And so, right, we talked about how this could do the assembly scanning. The iService provider is how you can retrieve out the stuff that the classes you've registered. There are like two functions to use. There's like get service and get required service. My team first started using get service, and we realized there was a problem with that. Get service will return null if for some reason it can't create the object. And so a lot of times you're not expecting null to happen when you're working with an IOC container. So that kind of creates some unexpected behavior. We're like, whoa, what's this null reference exception? And those are always fun to track down of what is that actually null. So when we dug down some more, we realized, hey, get service can return a null. So we changed everything to get required service. Get required service will throw an exception if for some reason it can't create that object. That's important because that's like an error state to be in. If you're asking for something and you can't get it out, that's an error state, and that worked better in our paradigm. So I recommend using that over get service. So we already looked at that code. So this was an earlier question. I won't cover how to use third-party IOC containers, ASP.NET Core, but you have lots of options to use if you need that added functionality. So look up what's there, and there'll be documentation on how to add it in, and I've tried out like Lamar, and it was pretty easy to add Lamar to ASP.NET Core. So another thing to know is middleware in ASP.NET. I don't know if they got the full concept from the Owen middleware pipeline, but it seemed very similar to me of the Owen middleware pipeline. And essentially every request coming in flows through this middleware pipeline, where each of these like middleware components will do some type of work and pass on the request down the chain. What's important to know is a middleware component could also terminate the request, preventing other things from potentially getting that and not executing work on it. So that's something to know. So let's I got this diagram from the source here that helps illustrate the concept coming in. So you have this request coming in, and middleware one can do some logic and then pass it on to the next middleware, the next to the next, and you can chain this, as long as you essentially want, right? But that adds more processing on each request, and then you can also process the response back as well. You can add to the responses. So, for example, say you had like an exception happen here, and you want to log that. Well, you can log that in like an earlier middleware component by registering your stuff accordingly. Also, I talked about a middleware component could potentially terminate this process and not pass it on to the rest of the middleware. So, for example, say like authentication. Say I tried to access something like a protected resource, I'm not authenticated. Well, my authentication middleware will say block. You're not logged in. I'm terminating this. So I'm not going to allow you to go down the pipeline, and I'm going to start returning, and I'm going to return response back up. So that's important to know about the middleware, is that they can terminate the whole pipeline, and so the other ones can't get them. So let's jump over to that example application. And your middleware pipeline is going to be in that startup class. So when you create ASP.NET Core project, you get like a program CS and you get a startup CS. And in your startup CS, this is where your middleware pipeline is. So everything that's registered in here is a middleware component of some sort, and you can add in your own. If you just have a simple one, you can do it through this use method, and create like a lambda for your middleware and pass it in. So I guess that's request. Oh, live coding. I shouldn't do live coding, and we'll just call this, wait, hold on. Yeah, also I usually have ReSharper take care of this for me, and I don't have ReSharper locally. So, but anyways, you would do a lambda here, and then you would just tie in whatever you want to happen here in your middleware. So it's pretty simple to use. If you have a simple one, you can also create your own class and have it separate outside of here, and then register it that way. So you have tons of options on adding in middleware. So it's important to kind of understand this pipeline on how this works. So, all right. So, you're at this point, you're ready to kind of start migrating to ASP.NET Core. one thing to be aware of, it will take some time. When we did it, I think it took us about a month. I think some teams at Pluralsight did it earlier, like faster. I think some said they did it about like 2 weeks. But depending on the size of your project, your time will vary. You want, personally, you want to stay focused on the migration and not deviate, because the more code you have going on and like feature work going on, you will then have to migrate that over to like your migration code, and that can get messy, it can get complicated. So you want to get that buy-off from product saying, hey, you know, we're ready to do this. We need this time set aside to do this migration. You only really want to address like critical bugs in that time. Fortunately, my team, we didn't have any bugs come up, so we were able to stay focused on that migration and continue on. So I've got some code here of something that we'll attempt to migrate together. But essentially what we have is we have a shared library that's used amongst ASP.NET Core, a web API project, and I have a console app here, and it doesn't really do much in the sense of my shared code. I've got this I have a Redis wrapper that will write to Redis, right? And then I could retrieve data out of Redis. I've got a dependency injection here. I chose a structure map because that's what my team was using at the time. So you can see we have a registration with structure map. And I wrote some configuration code. So it's probably, you're likely to see some type of wrapper. You probably have some type of wrapper over configuration manager that kind of adds some additional functionality that may like say, hey, this is an optional setting or this is a required setting. So if it's not there, that's like, it'll throw like an exception. So it's common to see some type of wrapper over configuration manager. And then you would have like a settings file that would then, you know, read from your wrapper over configuration. I recommend doing something like this to still wrap configuration when you do the migration process, because for unit testing, it was easier to mock out these type of setting classes. Oh, sorry, it was asked to get a little bigger before. So it's easier to mock out like a class like this than it is to try to mock out configuration in a unit test. So I still recommend doing something like this when you start the migration. And then my web project is pretty simple in the sense of all what it's really doing is just it can retrieve data out of Redis and save data. I'm just gonna make sure I have my my Redis container up and running, so that when I run this, we can see it do something that's not all that exciting, but you know, so if so if I call this, right, it just returns a value saying hello from Redis. So like that's stored in Redis, and then I can update that value if I head over to here and if I were to update that, I can then retrieve that value out, right? So something pretty simple. So like that's the application we're going to attempt to migrate during this time frame, but I'm running on about like 13 minutes left. So hopefully we'll have like enough time to get everything. So, okay, let's jump back over. So, right, create a branch that you'll be doing this migration over, so you don't affect your master branch, so you can still do your critical bug fixes during this time frame. And so the way how we did this is we started at the bottom of our build chain. We removed all applications from our solution besides like the bottom one, like the shared project that I showed here. So that'll be the very like bottom in our build chain. We removed everything and started there and did the conversion there first. And then we started with like, we had to take care of like dependency injection. We had to take care of like settings and stuff. So like that one might take a little bit of the longest first because of some of the shared code. And then we worked our way up from there. And we did do the try convert on our shared application first. That we tried doing that. That worked okay for that. But after that point, we started just doing that manual approach that I talked about, where we rename the folder, create the project again, add in the code, and do it that way. It was pretty easy for us to go that, like, to handle that way. But you can try convert and see if it works on your application, right? You may never know. It may just make everything work magically. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. So things that needs to be reworked, right? I mentioned this before, but settings, right? We've got to switch our settings. We've got to change our dependency injection, our startup code, right? Because you're probably used to working with that global ASX file. And so, right, that essentially gets converted into two files, your program and startup, which you might have had a startup before, which was like the OWIN pipeline. Log4net is also another thing. If you're using Log4net, you need to register a logging provider into the ASP.NET Core pipeline. That's something that's really important to happen, because if you don't do that, my team, we didn't realize we needed to do that first. And so we incorporated Log4net, because that's kind of our logging strategy at Pluralsight for the .NET Core, for the .NET Framework teams. And, logging was working locally, everything seemed like it was working just fine. But when we deployed our application, we had no logs, and we're like, why don't we have any logs? Like, this doesn't make sense. We're loading in a Log4net configuration. As far as we could tell, we're configuring it. But the thing was, we didn't add in a log provider. And there is a NuGet package that helps with that. There's this, it's Microsoft Extensions logging, Log4net, ASP.NET Core. And in your logging, there's this configure logging, you add that to it, and it just takes care of the rest. It'll add in your configuration. So let's go look at that real fast. So in your startup code, I think I did this here. So in the program CS, right, you're there's a function you can use called configure logging. All you do is add that NuGet package, say add Log4net, but you need to provide it a config file. And so usually that config file came from your web config or like an app config, right? Well, you don't have those anymore. You don't have your app config or your web config. Well, kind of. We'll get to that. But so what we did is we just created a Log4net config file that has the piece that would be in the web config, and we just load it in that way. And so then that way logging just gets taken care of, and it will log just fine. That's an important piece about Log4net, so don't forget that. We spent too much time on that trying to figure that out. Controllers have been unified essentially. There's no longer like this API controller, as far as I can tell, in 3.1. I think there was like in 2.1 or something like that. Essentially, you have like controller base, and then you have like derivatives of controller base. And so controller base doesn't have support for view. So like you mainly use it if you're only doing like a web APIs, like a REST API, and you don't need to return any Razor views or anything like that. You want to use controller base, or you can use controller. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead too far there. You could use controller if you have views and APIs you need to return. So it allows to return both of them. if you ever used from URI in your controller on like one of the parameters, that's no longer there. As from what we found to use from route is what we use as the replacement for that. There was also from query as well, but try from route first. If that's not working, try from query. Static files. That's that thing that broke on me when I was doing an example. So with ASP.NET Core, you have that Kestrel server running, right? In order to serve up static files, you have to include it in a certain area of your pipeline that says, hey, this is a static file. If you just say, use static file. So if we jump over here and head over to that example application, in my startup pipeline, you can see I was doing this static files thing. So this thing points to like a www root folder. So by default, you might get like a www root folder when you create like a web application. That's where that static files is. So it can serve up data there. You can also provide custom ones. So if you have another folder you want to provide static files to, you can do that by registering your own provider by saying, hey, this is the path of where it is. And this is the URL of where, like the path URL of where the static content is. So for example, if you're doing like CSS or something that you need to serve up, some JavaScript, right? Maybe in your static files area of www root, or it might be in a different spot. So that's how you can serve up static data. Also MVC, you can still do MVC, because when I was first exploring, I was like, I thought we had to switch to their new concept of razor pages for controllers. You don't have to port over to that. You can still do MVC and return your your model view controller concept. So in your process, you don't have to switch to that new razor pages. That's something to be aware of. You don't want to add additional work during your migration. Also, it does have support for SPAs for single page apps. So they have built-in functionality in the pipeline for single page apps. So you have an option when you're creating a web application to say, hey, I want it to be React or Angular. We have found that probably works when you're starting new. That worked better, but for our application, we had a hard time getting that to work in that concept. And so we found it easier to do something different, to kind of do our own way of using static files and kind of a route that would essentially say, hey, if nothing matched this, like you essentially get like, we did like a route override that would return this file because we had a React app. So that's just something to be aware of. Like, try out the single page app stuff and see if you can get that to work. If not, you have a way around that to make that work. That's just something to be aware of. So let's see, we've got 4 minutes left. So we're not gonna have time to convert anything. So let's just kind of keep talking a little about some things. So hosting options, you have multiple options to host ASP.NET Core. That's like the beauty part about it, right? You can host it in IIS. You can self-host it. You can host it in a Linux, right? Self-host, and they can have it behind like a bunch of reverse proxies. Like you can have it behind IIS, Apache, right? That's one thing that's really awesome. One thing I'll say is kind of my opinion, you can take it with a grain of salt, is try not to have too many moving parts during this migration, right? You're already, so much is changing already. So try to kind of limit out what can change. And one of those things is your OS, right? You might be tempted to say, hey, let's go to Linux, or let's go straight to containers during this migration. That's a lot to take on. So careful with that, like, because when you're trying to troubleshoot problems, there's like, well, was it related to .NET Core? Was it related going to Linux or containers? So I recommend staying on Windows and then converting over to one of the to Linux or containers. But that's just my opinion on it. You know, you could do whatever you want there. Also, Windows services or systemd things when you eventually go to Linux was super easy to do in .NET Core. There is this project type called worker service. I wish I knew about it earlier, but essentially we created a console app and then added the stuff we needed. But this worker service project will create like a console app in the sense of it's essentially an ASP.NET Core app, but it gets configured with a background service. This background service is supposed to be for like long running tasks. That's a separate deployable, right? But you need this NuGet package, this Microsoft Extensions hosting for this background service. And what's great about it is it's super easy to use. You can run it as a console app. And then if you want to run it as a Windows service, all you have to do is add in this Microsoft Extensions hosting's Windows service. And with that, you add a function call onto your program. Let's see, I think I have it in my examples here. Oh, wrong one. Let me, there we go. And then if we go over to this program here, you can see that this build is very similar to ASP.NET Core application. It creates this thing, it configures services, and then you just tack on this function that says use Windows service. And with that, it knows whether it's running as a Windows service or not. So when you're running as a console, it works just fine. It doesn't do anything special, right? I can debug this and I can run it as a console application, no problem. It doesn't give me saying, hey, this is a Windows service, you know, and gives you an error. So that's all what you have to do. And then with that, you can just register as a Windows service. It's super easy to do. All right. So kind of what to do for kind of the wrapping up your like migration, right? So I recommend creating a whole new build process, right? Create new builds that point to that new branch. Something cool that we discovered is you can build in Linux and deploy to Windows. Like we didn't realize we could, like that was something cool to learn that you can do. So because we are using GitLab, which allowed us to use containers to create builds, and we used Linux containers. Create a new release pipeline. So we are using Octopus. We created new projects in Octopus for our .NET Core applications, right? So they had their own release pipelines. Create a new stage and production environment because you want to be able to, because it requires some new thing. It requires some additional functionality. So you want that new environment to deploy to, so you don't accidentally mess up your current environment or something like that. Also, get a load balancer that can divide up traffic by percentage, right? So when you do this rollout of your new of going to ASP.NET Core, you can have a percentage of traffic start rolling over there, and you can start ramping it up to make sure that things are working well. You don't have any like performance problems. You don't have any like memory link problems or something, right? So that's something super important, because if you get a problem, right, all it takes is a quick switch to happen in your load balancer, and boom, you're back to your old environment, right? So with that, you can start ramping it up till you get to 100%. And if everything's working right, cool, then take out your old environment, right, and try to roll forward. You know, that's the rollout strategy I recommend to do is new environment, load balance between them, so that you can eventually just roll move it out. Also, that's like essentially the end of it. There is one thing that I found out recently. I didn't have enough time to explore this. Is AWS has a tool now that can help with your migration. But it requires an AWS account, so I wasn't able to really explore it yet. But this could potentially help in your process as well. So cool. That's all that I have for you. I can answer any questions now.
Any additional questions from folks?
Let me
If
stop
not,
sharing here.
oh, here we go. How did you handle migrating away from uses of system.web?
Good question. So are you referring to like the web request concept with system.web? Like there's like, is it referring to like the old HTTP calls with web request? Is that what you mean by system web? Okay. I think there just ASP.NET Core has a replacement for it, and there's, as far as I'm aware, we didn't have any issue with it by going to ASP.NET Core, but our application may have not been using something special in that, so we didn't have any problem with it. So that's kind of one of the strategies I recommend about why we create a new project instead of using that try convert, is sometimes these dependencies in there could potentially cause some problems, and you may not even, end up needing that dependency.
Any other questions from folks? I see some thanks in the YouTube chat. I'm going to go back. Oh, here's one more. How long did the overall process take to go to .NET Core?
Yeah, so for us, I think it took us about a month for my team. And with that was like, we were doing new builds in GitLab. So we were learning how to do a whole new build process, which if you haven't heard, GitLab was a pretty cool tool. We need new infrastructure and stuff. So it took us about a month, and in this project we had 10 projects total on that one. So,
and then the follow-up to that was, how big is your application?
So this one, oh man, I don't even remember. Like most code that we had didn't really need to be rewritten. It was essentially the only thing that really changed was like that startup code and configuration code. So most of it just stayed the same. So like the size of it didn't really matter too much there, unless you probably have something specific that's really preventing that migration. That's only .NET Core, like .NET Framework only. So
makes sense. And then there's a question about the slides. Would you be able to provide the slides? Or
yes,
a PDF of them,
yeah,
or put them on SlideShare or something?
Yeah, I will put the slides on the Slack channel.
If you give them to us, we can put them in the notes of the YouTube video as well.
Cool. Yeah, I will do that as well. So.
Okay. And then that's right. He did say that. Haha. Okay. Any other questions? Just refresh on YouTube. Looks like nothing there. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to our slides. So stick with us for a minute, because I think we have a couple prizes to give away. So, and we also want to give you the link so you can provide some feedback for Thomas. It's kind of weird to clap in this sort of environment when we meet in person. We always clap. But in this case, giving your good feedback for Thomas is probably the best applause you can give. So I'm going to just see if I can share those slides again. Did that work? Can you see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Just a quick reminder that our next event is on August 13th. We'll be regaled with wondrous delights and fantastic coding knowledge from the great presenter TBD. And the presentation will also be on TBD. So we'll get that information up on Meetup as soon as we can. You know where to find us there, or if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll know when we go live. So that said, first and most important thing here is the presenter ratings and comments. So if you go to this URL, it's https://tinyurl.com/capital S, capital L, capital C, capital P, capital R, capital I, capital Z, capital E. And that will get you to the survey where you can provide a little bit of feedback. And if you give us a way to recognize you, then you have the potential to also win a prize. And I'm going to leave this on for anybody who's watching on YouTube, but we'll trim it back to the slide before this at the end after it goes to video on demand. Just a couple other notes. Remember, you can find our website, slcnet.tech. If you want to use either of these links to get to the Slack team or to presentation proposals, which we're always happy to receive proposals for new presentations, you can use them here, but those links also exist on slcnet.tech. So if you get to there, then you're pretty much golden. And does anyone still need a minute on that link? Did we get it into the chat by any chance?
We did get it into the Zoom chat.
Yay. All right. Then in that case, I'm going to go to the next slide. Ooh, looks like we have a few prizes. That's good. We'll maybe wait a minute or two for folks to get their entries in. Alan, are you here? Alan?
Yes, I am here. I'm just marveling at the entries. They're just flooding in like thousands already.
Wow, thousands. Tell us more, Alan.
Well, there's another interesting entry. You know, we had our last meetup was on June 11th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today is July 9th. There is an entry on June 24th by, I don't know if you'll recognize the name of this person, but it looks like a Thomas Camargo. Isn't that interesting? Somehow someone snuck in between, maybe in preparation, he entered that day.
No comment.
Actually, Thomas, I don't know if you if that was intentional or not, but you're certainly eligible to enter. So I'll consider that as an entry for today if you like.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that, so I don't know.
It might have just been a, I don't know. It could have been anyone, honestly, but it has your name on it.
It's true, yeah.
The funny thing is they also rated your presentation, which clearly, unless it's a time traveler, they did not attend.
If anyone has any other ideas for topics for our MicroCon coming up, probably in November is when we're thinking about doing it. We're still happy to receive those in chat.
As well as I assume we would take suggestions for next month's.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to propose a talk for next month that you're willing to give, that would be
volunteer kind of a situation.
Yeah, that would be even greater. Yep.
Okay, I'm still seeing entries come in, so we'll give it another minute.
Okay. Entries are good.
Meanwhile, I'll just be jealous. Will is apparently on the beach.
Yeah. That's where I live.
All right. I'm seeing them slow down.
Okay.
So last chance, last call. I'm copying and pasting. Oh, I'm assuming people want to see this. We
Oh
usually-
yeah. Let me undo my share here. Take it.
Okay. I'm going to hide the emails of the innocent. All right. Oh, I apparently do not have access to share my
Oh,
screen.
did we not make you here, hold. Please hold. You came late. It's your fault.
Yeah, it is my bad.
There you go.
Okay. How's this?
Looks good.
All right, so we've got all the entries here. There's a grand total of 14. I thought it was miscounted. I thought it was thousands.
Well,
And we don't have, I need to have our slides up. I really am slacking here. Let me grab the presentation from tonight.
yeah. What's in your background? You're probably a little distracted by that guy like casting lightning bolt at you or whatever he's doing.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be me. That's a wizard fire genasi.
Okay.
And that's the role I play in our Friday D&D game. So keeps me in character.
Uh-huh.
All right. Our prizes tonight. Our first up. Okay, so we're just going to see them all at once. We've got the O'Reilly ebooks, which is a great benefit. By the way, if anybody is online from last month that hasn't got their book yet, hopefully it came today. If not, let me know. But O'Reilly had some organizational issues that they think they fixed. So let me know if you didn't get your ebook. But we do have some ebooks tonight. So we will randomly choose someone to receive. And the winner's name is Steve.
Do we have a Steve?
So Steve.
Not that Steve.
Not that Steve, huh? I can probably figure out which Steve it is by the email address that was given. So
Oh yeah, that'll work.
yeah, Steve will email you, and basically the option here is you'll get a digital ebook. I guess all ebooks are digital if you didn't know. You'll get an ebook of your choosing. So I will email a reminder, but if you proactively want to send to our user group email or on Slack to me, I will make sure you get your ebook. Any O'Reilly published ebook. All right. Our next winner for the digital electronic ebook is Derek Gallegos.
Gallegos.
Gallegos, okay. Yeah, I speak Portuguese, not Spanish. And the third O'Reilly ebook is Brock Coons.
Man, that is an auspicious group right there. Those are, yeah, congrats.
All right, next up for the JetBrains license, this is any JetBrains IDE of your choosing. The first one goes to Tim Collinson.
Winner, winner.
And the second one is for Mike Mahoney.
Very nice. All right. With that, you want to share the slides for a minute? Did you have those still?
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I thought I was
You
sharing
don't?
my whole screen.
Oh,
That's my bad.
I can share them if you want.
I intentionally didn't share my whole screen and then, okay. I stopped sharing. Do you want to share or do you want me to?
I got it.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay. So congrats to our winners. Again, last chance. Meet up next month. If you have a presentation in mind, go ahead and fill out our presentation form from the website. And we hope to see you in the Slack chat and, you know, around. and here next month, because we will certainly be online again next month. So we look forward to seeing you all. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. I'm going to take us offline.
Thanks, Will.